Have you ever wondered if a single penny could be worth more than an entire collection of ordinary coins? It sounds impossible, but some Lincoln wheat pennies have shocked collectors with values reaching thousands and even hundreds of thousands of dollars. The surprising part is that many of these coins spent years hiding in circulation, passing from hand to hand unnoticed. Every wheat penny has a story, but a select few stand out because of rare mint marks, unusual production errors, and incredibly low survival numbers. These are the coins that spark bidding wars at major auctions and send collectors searching through old jars, piggy banks, and forgotten collections, hoping to strike gold with a 1-cent coin. In today's video, we are counting down some of the most valuable wheat pennies ever produced. You'll discover what makes them so special, how to identify the key details that separate valuable examples from common ones, and why collectors are willing to pay remarkable prices to own them. Make sure you stay with us until the very end, because the final penny on today's list is one of the most famous and sought-after Lincoln cents in American numismatic history. And who knows, the next valuable coin you find could already be sitting in your collection right now. Now let's begin our countdown with coin number 1. 1940 Lincoln wheat penny, no mint mark. Have you ever stopped to think that a simple penny sitting forgotten in an old jar could be worth far more than anyone imagines? Most people toss pennies into drawers, piggy banks, cup holders, and dusty containers without giving them a second glance. They assume a penny is just a penny, but hidden among millions of ordinary-looking coins are a few extraordinary survivors that have quietly become treasures. Coins that have traveled through decades of American history. Coins that have witnessed wars, economic booms, family milestones, and generations of change. And among those forgotten relics is a coin that collectors never stop searching for, the 1940 Lincoln wheat penny with no mint mark. At first glance, it doesn't seem special. It's small, it's brown, it's old. But here's where things get interesting. Some examples of this humble cent have sold for amounts that would shock the average person. Others have revealed rare errors, unusual varieties, and remarkable mint characteristics that transformed an ordinary 1-cent coin into a prized collectible. Most people never notice this because the details are incredibly small. Yet those tiny details can make all the difference between a coin worth a few cents and one worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Imagine opening an inherited coin album from a grandparent. You flip through page after page of old coins and suddenly notice a wheat penny dated 1940. You might think nothing of it, but what if that coin possesses a rare characteristic collectors desperately want? What if a nearly invisible feature could dramatically increase its value? What happened next shocked collectors countless times throughout the years, as seemingly common examples emerged from old collections and revealed themselves to be exceptional survivors. The story of the 1940 Lincoln wheat penny begins during a fascinating period of American history. Europe was already engulfed in World War II, although the United States had not yet entered the conflict. American industry was expanding, technology was advancing, and millions of Lincoln cents flowed through the economy every day. These pennies purchased newspapers, candy, bus fares, and countless everyday necessities. Nobody imagined that decades later collectors would study these same coins under powerful magnification, searching for tiny clues left behind during the minting process. Philadelphia Mint struck hundreds of millions of Lincoln cents in 1940. Coins produced there carried no mint mark, which is why today's featured coin appears blank beneath the date. Many beginning collectors mistakenly think the absence of a mint mark is unusual, but for Philadelphia's cents of this era, no mint mark was completely normal. Nevertheless, identifying the Philadelphia issue correctly is the first step toward determining whether a coin deserves closer examination. The 1940 Lincoln wheat penny is composed primarily of copper, containing 95% copper with the remaining 5% made up of tin and zinc. The coin weighs approximately 3.11 grams and measures 19 millimeters in diameter. While these specifications seem simple, they are incredibly important. This tiny detail could change everything, because weight and composition are often among the first diagnostics used by collectors to authenticate valuable coins and identify altered examples. On the obverse, viewers are greeted by Victor David Brenner's iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln. Introduced in 1909, this design became the first regular-issue United States coin to feature an actual historical figure. Lincoln faces right with remarkable dignity and strength. Above his portrait appears the word liberty, while the date 1940 rests comfortably to the right. The motto "In God We Trust" arches gracefully across the top. When viewed under magnification, the finest examples display stunning detail within Lincoln's hair, beard, coat, and facial features. Turn the coin over, and an entirely different story emerges. Two elegant wheat stalks frame the reverse design, giving the series its famous nickname, the wheat penny. Between those wheat ears appears 1 cent and United States of America, while the Latin phrase "EPLUBUS UNUM" sits above. The design is simple, balanced, and unmistakably American. Yet collectors know that this reverse contains some of the most important clues when evaluating rarity, strike quality, and potential value. But here's where things get interesting. Despite the enormous number of 1940 pennies produced, relatively few survived in truly pristine condition. Most entered circulation immediately and spent years changing hands. They rattled around in pockets, cash registers, and coin purses. They were scratched, worn, damaged, cleaned, and sometimes even discarded. As a result, locating a sharply struck example with original mint luster becomes far more challenging than many people realize. This is why condition plays such a powerful role in determining value. A heavily circulated 1940 wheat penny may be worth only a modest premium above face value. However, a superb uncirculated example with blazing red surfaces can command dramatically higher prices. Collectors spend years searching for coins that appear almost exactly as they did when they left the Philadelphia Mint more than 8 decades ago. Most people never notice the difference between a worn coin and a gem-quality specimen. Experienced collectors do. They examine Lincoln's cheek, jawline, and hair details. They study the wheat stalks for sharpness. They inspect the fields for contact marks and evidence of cleaning. They search for full original color. These subtle details separate ordinary coins from extraordinary ones. And that is only the beginning of the mystery. Because hidden among the millions of 1940 wheat pennies are fascinating mint errors, unusual die varieties, doubled impressions, die cracks, off-center strikes, and other mint-made anomalies that continue to capture the imagination of collectors. Some are so subtle they require magnification to detect. Others are dramatic enough to be noticed immediately. What happened next shocked collectors. Coins that appeared ordinary at first glance sometimes revealed characteristics that dramatically increased their desirability. A tiny doubling effect, an unusual die crack, a striking anomaly, a remarkably preserved surface. Each discovery added another chapter to the story of this historic penny. Next up. Have you ever wondered if a single penny could quietly sit in a forgotten jar for decades while secretly carrying a story worth far more than 1 cent? Most people never think twice about pennies. They get tossed into cup holders, dropped into piggy banks, buried in old coffee cans, and ignored at the bottom of drawers. But every once in a while, a seemingly ordinary coin emerges from the shadows and reminds collectors why they never stop searching. Today, we're talking about a coin that millions of Americans once carried in their pockets without giving it a second glance. A coin born during one of the most dramatic periods in world history. A coin that witnessed the final months before the United States entered World War II. A coin that still turns heads among collectors more than 80 years later. At first glance, the 1941 Lincoln wheat penny with no mint mark appears completely ordinary. It looks like the kind of coin you might pass over at a flea market or find mixed in a pile of loose change. But here's where things get interesting. Hidden among the countless examples produced that year are remarkable high-grade survivors, fascinating minting mistakes, and rare varieties that have sold for amounts most people would never believe possible for a humble 1-cent coin. Most people never notice this, but the difference between an ordinary 1941 penny and a valuable one can come down to a tiny detail visible only under magnification. a slight doubling, an unusual strike, an exceptional state of preservation. This tiny detail could change everything. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why collectors continue hunting through old albums, inherited collections, coin jars, and estate sales, searching for this historic copper treasure. The value may leave you speechless. Let's begin. The 1941 Lincoln Wheat Penny without a mint mark was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, which at that time did not place a mint mark on its circulating cents. During 1941, America was still recovering from the Great Depression while tensions overseas continued to rise. Factories were beginning to prepare for wartime production, and the nation stood on the edge of a historic turning point. Millions of pennies were needed to support daily commerce, and the Philadelphia Mint worked tirelessly to meet demand. As a result, hundreds of millions of 1941 cents entered circulation. Because so many were produced, many people assume the coin cannot possibly be valuable. What happened next shocked collectors. Decades passed, most of those pennies circulated heavily. They were spent, damaged, corroded, lost, melted, or simply worn down by years of handling. The surviving population of pristine examples became smaller and smaller. Eventually, collectors realized that finding a truly exceptional 1941 Lincoln cent was far more difficult than finding an ordinary worn example. To understand why the coin remains so popular, you first need to appreciate its remarkable design. On the obverse, or front side, stands one of the most recognizable portraits in American coinage history. President Abraham Lincoln faces to the right with a calm and dignified expression. Above his head appears the word liberty, while the date 1941 is positioned to the right. The national motto, "In God We Trust," arches gracefully across the top rim. Victor David Brenner's portrait transformed American coinage when it debuted in 1909. It was the first regular circulating U.S. coin to feature a real historical figure rather than an allegorical image. Even decades later, the design retained its elegance and power. Turn the coin over, and the reverse reveals the iconic wheat penny design. Two wheat stalks frame the outer edges of the coin, symbolizing America's agricultural strength and prosperity. Between them are the inscriptions 1 cent and United States of America. Above these inscriptions appears the Latin motto, E Pluribus Unum. The simplicity of the design is part of its enduring appeal. Collectors often describe the wheat penny as a perfect blend of artistry, history, and symbolism. Every detail tells a story about America during the early 20th century. The coin itself weighs approximately 3.11 grams and consists of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. Its diameter measures 19 millimeters. That copper composition gives original examples a beautiful reddish color when preserved properly. Over time, many coins toned into shades of brown or chocolate, while the rarest survivors retained much of their original mint-red brilliance. But here's where things get interesting. Not all 1941 pennies are created equal. Some were struck with extraordinary sharpness, revealing every detail in Lincoln's hair and every grain line within the wheat ears. Others emerged from worn dies or experienced striking irregularities that created unusual characteristics collectors now pay premiums to acquire. Most people never notice this, but the true story of the 1941 Lincoln Wheat Penny is not just about its age. It's about survival. Think about it. Every pristine example that exists today somehow escaped decades of circulation. It avoided pocket wear, cash registers, children's piggy banks, and countless opportunities for damage. Each gem-quality survivor represents a tiny miracle of preservation. And that is precisely why serious collectors become so excited when they encounter an exceptional specimen. Yet the most fascinating chapter is still ahead. Because hidden among ordinary 1941 pennies are valuable errors, sought-after varieties, and astonishing auction records that continue to surprise even experienced collectors. Some have sold for hundreds of dollars, others have crossed into the thousands, and a few elite examples have reached values that leave newcomers completely stunned. In the next section, we'll uncover the rare eras and varieties that transformed ordinary pennies into collector treasures, reveal the exact details you should examine under a magnifying glass, and expose the auction results that prove just how valuable the right 1941 wheat penny can become. Trust me, you won't want to miss what comes next. Up. Have you ever picked up an old penny and wondered whether it might be hiding a secret worth thousands of dollars? Most people glance at a penny for less than a second before tossing it into a jar, dropping it into a cash register, or forgetting about it completely. But what if one of those ordinary-looking coins carried a story stretching back more than 80 years? What if that tiny copper coin survived one of the most important years in world history and somehow made its way into your collection, your grandfather's coin album, or an old box tucked away in an attic? Today, we are uncovering the fascinating story of the 1945 Lincoln wheat penny with no mint mark, a coin that many collectors believe is still hiding in plain sight. At first glance, it looks like just another old cent. It doesn't sparkle like gold. It doesn't contain silver. It isn't large or flashy. Yet some examples have sold for astonishing amounts of money, turning an ordinary 1-cent coin into a prized collector's treasure. But here's where things get interesting. Millions of these pennies were produced during a historic moment when the world was watching the final chapters of World War II unfold. While soldiers returned home and nations celebrated victory, the United States Mint continued striking coins that would pass through countless hands. Most were spent, worn down, damaged, or lost forever. But a select few survived in remarkable condition, preserving a piece of American history that collectors desperately search for today. Most people never notice this, but the difference between a common 1945 penny and a valuable one can come down to tiny details invisible to the naked eye. A slight doubling in the design, an unusual die crack, a perfectly preserved surface, a brilliant red color untouched by decades of circulation. This tiny detail could change everything. And before this story is over, you'll discover why some collectors spend years hunting for the finest examples of this humble copper coin. You'll learn about rare eras, surprising auction records, hidden features, and values that may leave you speechless. The story begins in 1945. The year 1945 marked one of the most significant turning points in modern history. World War II was drawing to a close. Millions of Americans followed news reports from Europe and the Pacific. Factories that had spent years producing wartime supplies were preparing for a new era. Amid all this change, the Philadelphia Mint continued striking coins for circulation across the nation. The 1945 Lincoln wheat penny without a mint mark was produced at the Philadelphia Mint. During that era, Philadelphia cents carried no mint mark, making them instantly recognizable to collectors. While enormous quantities were struck, the passage of time transformed this once common coin into a fascinating collectible. What happened next shocked collectors. As decades passed, people spent these pennies without a second thought. Children bought candy with them, families stored them in jars, businesses counted them by the thousands. Very few individuals considered saving pristine examples because they seemed too common to be valuable. That assumption would prove costly. Today, collectors understand that locating a truly exceptional 1945 penny is far more difficult than finding a worn example. High-grade survivors with strong original color and flawless surfaces are incredibly desirable because so few escaped circulation. To appreciate why this coin remains popular, we must examine its iconic design. On the obverse, Abraham Lincoln gazes toward the right. The portrait, created by Victor David Brenner, had already become one of the most recognizable images in American coinage. Above Lincoln appears the inscription "In God We Trust." To the left stands liberty. To the right sits the date 1945. The design possesses a quiet dignity that has resonated with collectors for generations. Every line in Lincoln's hair, every contour of his face, and every detail of the engraving reflects the artistry that helped make the wheat penny one of America's most beloved coins. Turn the coin over, and the reverse reveals the classic wheat penny design. Two wheat stalks frame the outer edges, creating a balanced and elegant appearance. Between them are the words 1 cent and United States of America. Above them appears EPLUIBUSUNUM. The wheat ears symbolize agricultural abundance and national strength. For decades, this reverse design became synonymous with American coin collecting. Even today, many collectors remember discovering their first wheat penny and immediately feeling connected to history. The coin weighs approximately 3.11 grams and consists of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. Its diameter measures 19 millimeters. Unlike the steel cents of 1943, the 1945 penny returned to a copper-based composition made partly from recycled wartime materials, giving each coin an additional layer of historical significance. But here's where things get interesting. Not all 1945 pennies are equal. Some were struck with exceptional precision, creating razor-sharp details and beautiful luster. Others display unusual minting characteristics that collectors eagerly search for today. The condition of the coin can dramatically affect its value, sometimes transforming a 1-cent coin into a collectible worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Most people never notice this, but color plays a massive role in determining value. Collectors classify copper cents as brown, red-brown, or red. Brown examples have darkened over time due to oxidation. Red-brown pieces retain a mixture of original color and toning. Red examples preserve most of their original mint color and often command the strongest prices. This tiny detail could change everything. Imagine two identical 1945 pennies struck on the same day. One circulates for decades and becomes worn and dark. The other is carefully stored and retains its original red brilliance. The difference in value can be astonishing. As more collectors entered the hobby during the 20th century, competition for top-quality examples intensified. Registry-set collectors began chasing the finest known specimens, driving values upward and creating fierce demand for coins with exceptional eye appeal. Yet condition alone is only part of the story. Hidden among ordinary 1945 pennies are fascinating errors and varieties that continue to capture attention throughout the numismatic world. Some display dramatic die cracks. Others reveal repunched details or unusual striking characteristics. A few possess minting mistakes that transform an ordinary cent into a prized conversation piece. What happened next shocked collectors. Auction records began demonstrating just how much advanced collectors were willing to pay for elite examples. Coins once dismissed as pocket change suddenly appeared in major auctions, drawing bids that exceeded expectations and proving that rarity often comes from preservation rather than low mintage. And the deeper researchers looked, the more intriguing the 1945 wheat penny became. In the next section, we'll uncover the rare errors and varieties associated with the 1945 no-mint mark wheat penny, reveal exactly how to identify valuable examples, explore auction records that stunned the collecting community, and expose the hidden details most people completely overlook. Trust me, the most exciting part of this story is still ahead. Next up.